Welcome to this week's episode of the Refold Roundtable podcast, where we talk about the things you want us to talk about. And this week, we are talking about healthy language learning. My name is Bree, aka Briz, and I am a social media mage for Refold, and I make memes, and I'm also learning Spanish. I'm accompanied by Shiki. Do you want to introduce yourself, Shiki?
Yes, I am Shiki, Japanese learner and a language coach at Refold.
You're learning.
Hmm?
What are you learning? For
It feels like
anybody
a
who
cold
hasn't
call.
heard the
Japanese.
for anybody who hasn't heard the podcast before.
Japanese.
And we also have Gorg, aka George, aka any variation thereof, joining us. Gorg, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hello, I am Gorg Pag. I am also a language coach, but mostly just like the community manager for Refold. And I learn languages.
Nice. What languages are you proficient in for anybody who doesn't know?
Oh,
'Cause
I
it's
don't
super
know.
cool. I don't know, Tagalog,
I know
Filipino, whatever.
Filipino, Spanish are okay. Yeah,
I'd say they're more than pretty okay, honestly.
they're
It's just me.
okay.
Well, today we are talking about healthy language learning, something that we're all actually pretty excited to talk about. It's something that has actually come up in my life recently, and I have been making changes to my language learning routine. Um, what are your thoughts, just in general, on healthy language learning? Do you feel like you have a good balance? Um, what challenges do you guys have?
Oh boy. So I would say like, do I have a good balance? What do you mean by that? Can we like be more specific?
You can make the question whatever you want it to be. Good balance.
So
Do you spend all of
like
your time language learning, or do you make time for other things?
I do not spend all of my time language learning. I have like work and real life responsibilities, but unfortunately, like language learning slash refolding is like my only hobby.
Mm,
So it's not like I'm like, hey, I need to meet and play Dungeons and Dragons once a week with like the squad or something like, like I definitely it's my only hobby, so it's easy to make time for because I don't have to
yeah,
like worry about making time for other hobbies.
yeah, that makes sense. How about you, Shiki?
Uh, I kind of have to have a healthy relationship with language learning against my will because I just don't have time. uh, before I started school this semester, I was working close to full time with Refold. And then once I started school this semester, I had to go to part time, even though in my heart, I like to think I'm still full time. But uh, when I started school, it's kind of rough because I'm like almost a full time student and then part time employee at Refold. And then
Yeah.
I also try to do Japanese stuff. But it was pretty sad when I saw my toggle report from Sunday that I only did 3 hours of Japanese. And
To me,
yeah,
that's pretty good. That seems like a big old chunk of time.
no, I cried.
No, no. Okay, so you have a healthy relationship
Yeah.
with your toggle, it sounds like. Yeah,
Japanese
I've
is
got
So
also my only
so
hobby.
yeah,
you're in
yeah.
the military. Would they let you, like, listen while you're doing, like, your drills? Like, can you be
No.
like, Sorry, Sarge, I'm HChatting right now," or I'm
No,
refolding."
that would
Would
not
that
fly.
fly?
No, that
Sorry,
would not.
Sarge, I'm A-chatting right now. Oh my gosh.
You don't understand me,
"Sorry,
Sarge. I
Sarge, I
gotta
gotta get
get
my passive immersion in, okay?"
yeah, I gotta get my passive.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I feel like similar to you, Shiki, like I begrudgingly have a healthier relationship with language learning. When I first started, it was COVID, and I'm a just so everybody knows. I guess my context is I'm a stay-at-home mom, but I'm like a work-at-home mom. So I work part-time. But at the beginning of the pandemic, I had just moved, so I hadn't found a job yet. So I had a lot more free time, and was able to immerse a lot in the very beginning, but after getting a job and now I've just started homeschooling my daughter, I found that I actually have to limit the amount of time that I language learn, um, so that I can, have time to be a good mom and spend time with my family and not neglect them, and also do my job well and, take care of other stuff, like be healthy and drink water and whatever. So I too like I don't cry when I look at my stats, but I used to think, "Oh man, yeah, I immersed for like 4 or 5 hours today. That was great." But now I'm like, "Oh, okay. If I get 2 hours, I feel like that's been a solid day for me." So what do y'all
So, do
consider?
you have to remind yourself to drink water? Because I feel like I pretty, like
Oh.
it's organic for me just to always have, like, a liter of water next to me, and I go through, like, 4 or 5 a day, but
Um, it is I don't like water. So I
you
have to
don't
like
like
make myself
water?
drink it.
It's
Mm-mm, I
like
don't like it.
Same.
the baseline thing that we drink.
Yeah, I know. I
Yeah.
like tea. I liked energy drinks, but I've recently cut those out of my life.
Right now, I'm
And
having my famous coffee and salt,
ugh,
along with water, so
I
I
can't
don't
handle this. Coffee
So
and salt.
salty.
I
coffee
wanna
and
know
salt,
if
try it.
anybody else has heard of that.
It's really good. If you've got some really bad black coffee and you're, like, trying to cut
Yeah,
the sugar, try the salt and black coffee.
I'm gonna try it.
It makes it taste like a I don't know, like a really strong black
Yeah.
tea.
That
Okay.
sounds like a terrible time that I never want to experience, but you do you.
I'll try
Thank
it
you.
just for giggles. So let's talk a little bit about, I think there's kind of a stigma or a misconception that everybody who is doing immersion learning is spends all day, every single day in their language as much as they can. When the 3 of us are pretty good
Is that really
examples
a
of people
stigma?
who would. I don't know if stigma is the right word.
It's like a
Feel free to correct
stereotype,
me.
I think.
Yeah, but I also think it's kind of like looked down upon too, right? Like people outside of immersion kind of use it as an excuse of like, oh, those people are crazy.
God,
I
I
Right?
did not
Especially
wish.
touch
me.
enough grass to understand what people who are not immersion learners think. I don't think I
Same.
know I don't think I know enough. I work for
I've been on
Refold,
Reddit.
and, I work 3rd shift, so, like, pretty much all of my
Yeah.
socialization by the sheer fact that I work overnight is on Discord, so I
Yeah.
might not touch enough grass to know what, normies think
I
about
touched
it,
grass
but
today. So
the
yeah.
last time I touched grass, I skinned my knee.
Ooh.
Yeah, my desk broke and I was taking it downstairs and then, like, the grass was wet
Yeah.
and I fell down and I was like,
Never
"You know
again.
what? This is why never again. This is why I stay in my condo."
The last time I actually took a picture one time to kind of prove how much my immersion life balance was of me reading a book outside while touching grass. I thought it was so funny. But um a stigma or stereotype of whichever word you want to use of people that are immersion learners, people tend to think that everybody who does it or you almost to make progress you have to immerse like 24/7. And the three of us are kind of examples of people who are really into immersion, but we can't do it all the time. Um,
Right.
what do you guys think? Do you feel like you're still making progress even though you're not spending as much time in the language? And if
I
not, do you feel like that trade-off is worth it?
so I feel like I definitely make progress when I immerse, and I'm
Mm,
not sure how much more progress I would be making if I did have 5 hours a day to spend on it.
right.
Um 'Cause I kinda feel like the people who are like, "Oh, yeah, I immerse, 8 hours a day." They're like, do you really?" Because I kinda see you on Discord chatting to people and, like, are you really being efficient with those, like, 8 hours? Like, are you
Called
actually
out.
focusing?
Whoa.
Because someone who really does just have, like, an hour to immerse, who's not talking to people on Discord and
Yeah.
actually focusing, they seem to make pretty good gains. I don't know if anyone is aware of Cole or Hulk. He got really good at Cantonese in, like, a year, and he does, like, 30 minutes to an hour a day. Like, that's
Yeah.
not a lot like, immersion learning or Refold standards, right? Like,
Right.
that's actually, like, an hour less than we officially recommend for somebody doing, like, a Category 4 language like Cantonese, and he's now at 7,000 known words. and
That's
it's been like
incredible.
a year and a half or something. That's a lot. So I would say
Mhm.
you can definitely make big gains without immersing for 8 hours a day.
Yeah.
I think so
I,
too.
I still notice progress whenever I go to immerse in something, like, after a week of, I don't know, doing, like, 3 hours a week or something, and when I go back to it the next week, I still notice that it's like I haven't suddenly forgotten everything. I can still read kanji, and I can still understand things when I hear it, so
Yeah. I've noticed that my progress seems to have slowed, but it might also feel that way because I'm definitely knee deep in the intermediate plateau where no matter what you're doing, it seems like time is just standing still. Um, I don't feel like I'm getting worse with Spanish. Now that I'm only doing, 1 to 2 hours a day, maybe longer on the weekends if I'm binging a book because I do have more time. I don't work on the weekends. Um, but I
I work on the
even,
weekends. I have
yeah,
this bad habit of working on the weekends. You know, so I don't have to. It's just something like there's always more work to be done, and
yeah, it's always a pile that's it's like kind of like laundry where how like no matter how often you do it, there's just always more to be done. But yeah, I totally get that. But I feel like the
so
trade-off that I get,
we're
even if like my progress isn't as fast as it would be, I'm happy with the trade-off because I am now trying to view like language learning as something that like enhances my life holistically rather than something that is just like my entire life's goal, you know?
yeah, I think there's definitely a certain mindset, particularly in like the Japanese learning community, where they like judge themselves and other people's value on their Japanese ability, which is probably not the most healthy thing. I don't see that as much in other communities though.
it's definitely not the most healthy thing. It's not a probably, it's definitely.
Yeah,
Yeah, and it
but
also might be like a phase of life thing too, because like if you have a lot of time to spend, like if you're younger, you don't have, a full-time job, or maybe you don't have a family or any combination thereof, like if you have more time to dedicate to language learning, I don't necessarily see it as a bad thing, but if it's something that starts to like take away from things that are healthy for you to do, I think it's definitely good to like evaluate, you know, where language is in your life and how it's
yeah,
there to make it
do
better.
do either of you sacrifice social time or like sleeping or eating time to immerse?
I used to.
You used to. How about you,
Yeah.
Shiki?
So it's kind of a funny answer because it's like huh, that ADHD moment when you're immersing for like
Right?
3 hours, then forget you're hungry. It's like that kind of situation.
Mood.
Uh,
That is so
yeah,
me. Yep.
but I don't like purposefully neglect things. It's like accidentally. But when it comes to
Yeah.
like socializing, there's like a very, very, very small handful of people that I actively want to socialize with. I'm very, like, picky about the company I keep. So, like, sacrificing socialization, I guess, doesn't really feel like I'm sacrificing socialization just because it's like I have such a small social need to begin with. So,
Yeah. I feel that.
Gotcha. Well,
Yeah.
beyond like sacrifice, so I know that kind of like going into this, I think a lot of people in the audience and a lot of the hosts were thinking like the mental health aspects of like because immersion can be lonely, right? Like we're by ourselves, like knees deep in a book or something, and like not the most social hobby, I would say. Are there any like physical health issues with like language learning? Like I've seen people who are like, "Oh yeah, I'm definitely like doing immersion all day long." And then early on in Refold, like before I was a moderator, before I was hired, I definitely recall someone messing up their ears from
Yes.
from having their earphones in all
My
day.
phone yells at me all the time, and it gives me, like, these, like, ear health warnings. It says that I need to, like, give my ears a break. I'm not always, like, listening to Spanish, sometimes it's music or whatever, but I'm ADHD, so I like to have background noise that kinda helps me stay focused. What my phone doesn't know is that I have one ear out, one ear in, so I am giving my ears a break, but I think it's really important to monitor, like, how long your earphones are in if you're constantly having immersion running through your head 24/7, you gotta be careful with that. Another thing is, like, being sedentary is not great. What I've actually started doing for me is I've started pairing immersion with, like, healthy activities. So, I've been trying to go for, like, a mile or 2 walk every single evening, and I pair that with listening to a podcast. So, I get my immersion done, I get my walking done, I get some alone time, and it's great. Or if I have to do dishes, I will listen to a book while I do dishes. I really honestly feel like doing dishes is one of the best things you can do while while trying to listen because it's
I
so
hate
mindless,
I
but
hate
it's
it. I
so
hate
easy to
it.
focus.
I actually am a big fan of like mindless tasks and having something to listen to, but not the dishes. I actually struggle with my dishes. My sink is small. I've only got like one basin, and I feel like it's a
Yeah.
chore because I'm definitely guilty of letting the dishes pile. So I
Yeah.
actually like to have full focus on the dishes when I do them. But
Really? I
I
don't.
do, yeah, because I feel like how am I going to attack this? How can I make room? And I end up just putting them in a wash tub so that I can actually use the sink to wash. But
Yeah.
you mentioned ear health and your devices yell at you.
Yeah.
And I definitely think that, like, I have nerve damage. So, like, I've had some
Mm.
surgeries done to, like, release nerves, like, cubital tunnel syndrome, carpal tunnel syndrome. And I definitely think there's a risk. Like, I know that for some of us people with RSIs, like carpal tunnel syndrome or cubital tunnel syndrome, like, and these are big deals. People are like, oh, your wrist hurts. No, we've got loss
Mhm.
of motion. We're weaker. Like, I can't make a perfect circle with my thumb and my index finger.
Oh, wow.
Um, yeah, that's just nerve damage, right?
Yeah.
Uh, I definitely cannot sit at my computer and clickety clack away like a young person who is healthy can, you know. And I definitely think that sometimes I guess I feel a little like jealous of people who are like, oh yeah, I have no carpal tunnel and I can just sit all day and like mine and intensive, and I do like 15 minutes of it and my wrist is hurting.
Yeah.
Um, there are definitely some physical detriments to, I think, like the sort of hyper sedentary lifestyle that some of us have in the like immersion learning community.
Yeah. Yeah. I've
I
actually got
have
some. Oh, go ahead.
I've heard of people who have started doing a routine of doing a push up for every card they get wrong in Anki to
Oh my
incorporate
gosh.
physical
I would
activity.
I would have to do I would do endless push-ups if I
I've thought
still did
about doing
Anki.
it. I've thought about doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's pretty funny. I agree with you, George. I think that just like in general, I think making sure that like whatever you do, whatever your hobby is, language learning is definitely our focus because that's what this podcast is all about. But whatever hobbies you have to make sure that you stay healthy doing it. Because you only have one body, right? And you have to take care of it. Uh, I have some like I'm not gonna go too deep into it, but I have some like weird heart stuff going on. Not because of language learning, obviously, that would be crazy. But I have some like weird heart stuff going on. So I've really had to cut out and really be mindful of the caffeine that I drink and how active I am and the things that I'm eating. And it all of that happening made me kind of reevaluate everything that I was doing in my life, including, learning Spanish, which I do consider a huge part of my life, which is why, like I said earlier, I'm trying to pair that with like healthier activities because that makes those activities more palatable. And I turn that stuff that's like has to be a chore into like special moments of my day. I don't like walking, but I like walking when it's, podcast time. It's something exciting and special. And I get to find out what happens next in the next episode of Sandman. Or um, also, I've started. How is y'all's sleeping schedule? Like, do
Lord,
you guys
I
sleep
do not have
regularly?
no, not at all.
No.
In theory, I go to bed at 10,
Yeah.
um, but I end up like I take my melatonin, and then
Mm.
because I have a screen time issue, I get
Yeah.
even
Same.
with the blue light filter, I end up
Hmm.
like immersing in bed. Like usually like 9 or
Yeah.
10 PM is actually when I start. That's usually because like my friends are already asleep. like, so I'm not, like, distracted with chatting,
Right.
and, I'm totally unplugged from work, not answering emails, not helping people on Discord. It's, like, truly my time. But what ends up happening is I think because I'm, like, reading in bed, I don't sleep well, and,
Mm.
yeah, I frequently get 5 or 6 hours of sleep, and I'm not happy about it.
What about you, Shiki? How's your sleep?
I think that my sleep schedule is the one thing about my life that is not completely chaotic. Uh, I
Really? I'm so
yeah,
proud of you. That's great.
yeah. I go to bed around 9-ish PM
Okay.
and then lay in bed for an hour watching TikToks with my husband, but we're not going to talk about that. And then I go to sleep and wake up around 6 a.m. like every morning.
Pretty good.
Mhm.
I've
That's great.
when I first started language learning, and this is like in general, I'm a night owl, or I'm predisposed to be a night
Me
owl.
too.
I've always stayed up late. I've always had a hard time falling asleep. I love reading in bed. I love staying up late. But if 15-year-old me could hear this, 15-year-old me would bully me. But I find that if I go to bed earlier and I wake up earlier, I am able to pay better attention in the morning to my immersion material than I am right before bed, which is shocking, I know, but I have learned to love, like, going to bed early if I can, because like, not it's not always possible, sometimes things happen or the kid is doing stuff, whatever, but generally, I try to be in bed around, like, 10 or 11, and then I wake up around between 6 and 7. And my morning routine is I wake up, I make myself a cup of tea, and I read or I listen to something, and it's nice, it's quiet, no one else is talking. My brain feels super fresh. I can't believe I'm a morning person. Like, I want to beat myself up and bully myself just talking about that. But I've found that, like, if I sleep better, I remember more. And if I remember more, I don't feel as guilty not spending as much time, language learning.
Really, I feel like that's such a negative mindset to have with the community is like, you're not doing 5 hours a day. What are you even doing? Right? Because
Living.
realistically,
Yeah.
you can make good progress an hour a day. And it's not like the languages are going to disappear. Like people are like, we want fluency now. But, you know, it comes. Like you're never going to like forget your Japanese or your Spanish or your Filipino. Like I take breaks from reading books in Filipino all the time. Um,
Yeah.
because it's not the best content, and my interest waxes and wanes. But I'm definitely competent, and I understand a lot more today than I did yesterday, whether I studied or not.
Yeah.
And like, you're not going to forget your language. It doesn't have to be erased to fluency. Like, it's cool getting fluent faster, but even when you're fluent, it's not even binary, right? Like,
Yeah.
there are still going to be some times that you just don't some things that you just don't know. Even as a native, I ran into something earlier. What was it? On my lunch break, I was reading Reddit in English, and yeah, I ran into something, a word that I just didn't know. And I'm a native speaker of English. It happens. And it was on Reddit of all places. It wasn't even like I was reading a technical thing.
Yeah,
Now,
Reddit's pretty diverse though.
I want to bring it back to the physical side of things. So again, I feel like
Sure.
it's just too easy to talk about all the mental health stuff. But
It's yeah.
how about like ergonomics? I feel like that's one thing that
Ooh.
we of a community have not really covered is like what's healthy practices for your ears, and like
Yeah.
you might give yourself tech neck, right? Because I know I've given it to myself when I was younger.
Yeah.
About 6 or 7 years ago, when I really started with language learning hardcore, I was on my phone a lot. And I now have tech neck. I have to have my monitor and my laptop like jacked up, like boosted. And I can't like look down too often. Like when I'm on my
Yeah.
my phone or my tablet, I have to have it sort of elevated. Um, and I do worry that some like of the younger people who have not gotten old yet. Because when I was 19, I didn't have any of these problems either. But when you're like 30, these start to be actual issues.
Yeah.
Um, do you guys ever get hurt physically from your language learning? Like, are there any times where it's like, wow, I've actually hurt my neck because I was reading for 8 hours or something?
I'll get like headaches, and this is just from like, my job is online, right? So I work virtually in a virtual office. I spend my working hours on my computer. So I get headaches. So it's hard to, look away, like you say, touch grass, go outside, not look at a monitor. Um, and just like generally, like my ears are very sensitive, and because of the headphone use, the heavy headphone use, at first I would have like both earbuds in at the same time and never let an ear rest. And that, I don't think it gave me infections, but it definitely irritated my ears really badly. There's some good tips though, I think, specifically for that. Like if you're going to be listening to stuff, rotate which ear you have listening to things so you can let the other ear relax and not have, huge amounts of decibels going into it. And I'm not
I
sure if Android devices have this, but like iPhone ones have it where you can actually have a decibel limiter so that the volume can only go up so high and it doesn't go to unhealthy levels. So definitely enable that if you can.
I have issues with shoulder tension
Mm.
because I sit at my desk like a shrimp.
I sit at my
Wait, can you
desk like a
describe
shrimp too.
that? What do you mean you sit at your desk like a
Yeah,
shrimp?
yeah. Describe it for everybody listening. Like, let's all get a nice visual picture here.
I can't imagine. What does that entail?
So imagine you have like a typical illustration of a shrimp where their tail is like all curled and then like their whole body is basically curled. So their head is like over their tail, basically, like curled. So my body is like all like
Like
my
C-shaped.
shoulders, yeah, like my shoulders are over my legs and stuff because I'm all like hunched over at my desk all the time.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Kind
Well,
of hunched over right now as we're
that does
talking.
not sound super ergonomic.
Definitely not. Yeah.
After this, Shiki, you and I should exchange like how we sit at our desk. We can shame each other into having good
Yeah,
posture.
yeah.
Yeah, like this isn't like language learning specific problems, but it is a problem where like, if your hobbies aren't active, it's something that you have to be even more aware of. You know, and like what's another thing too? Like you got to stand a certain amount of times a day, you got to stand up, stretch, whatever. It seems stupid, but as an old person, as an old folks, like you're not young forever. That sounds like such a grandparent thing to say, but it's true. You're
It's
not young
true,
forever.
you're
You got to take
not.
care of yourself,
You
you
know,
know?
um, you used to, like, really enjoy pounding energy drinks, right? Like,
I did.
that was one of our things, like, we both
It,
bonded over the
we
fact that we love
bonded over
caffeine.
energy drinks.
We did, and you've recently developed some heart issues, right?
I
So, like, now
have.
you can't do that, right? It's
I
like,
can't. We're
I can't have
investigating.
I
Yeah.
can't have 3 energy drinks a day now
I can't have
because
any caffeine in a day. It's it's
yes,
so sad.
it's
But
incredibly sad.
it's actually not so bad. Come after coming through the caffeine withdrawal. It's really not that bad. I've got water in a Yeti next to me, so I can pretend that it's coffee, and I sip on that throughout the day. And I drink decaf tea in the morning, and it's fine. But I think that like there's also like this thing like cramming. A lot of people, especially coming from like a school background, right? If you're just out of college, if you're in college, if you're in high school, there's like this huge like cramming mentality where you stay up all night, you pound energy drinks, and you learn as much as you can. I think at a certain point, even if you do have a lot of time to language learn, which a lot of people listening probably do, if you have a lot of disposable time, that's great. This is the time for you to learn a language and go hard. But you also have to make sure that you're sleeping and you're not making it to a point where you're not able to focus as well because you're up too much, or
Yeah.
you're not doing
Oh,
anything else. I think you can only
I
really
can't do
absorb so much.
all-nighters anymore. I used to be able to.
Me too. Me
Or as we
too.
say
That
in
was
the
my
South, I
thing.
used to could. I used to could
You
do
used to could.
all-nighters. I used to could,
Native.
double modals. But now I can't. Like
Yeah.
like any 6 is pushing it for me. I definitely function better on 8 or 9 hours of sleep.
Yeah.
And I don't know, there's just a lot. Like I definitely think that being highly sedentary with language learning is definitely got some drawbacks. For a while, I don't think my lighting was very good, and because I was
Mm.
always staring at a screen, I feel like my prescription has just continued to get worse in my eyes over the past couple of years. And before then, I went like a decade, and my prescription hadn't changed for my glasses. And now it's like every year, it's like, oh yeah, we need a little bit stronger. And I
Yeah.
think it's from being inside, uh, not getting enough vitamin D, and yeah, there's just a lot. Now, going back to some of the more like interesting mental health topics, has refolding or immersion learning affected your anxiety levels? Because I'll say it did. I'll say before I joined Refold, I was a very
Yeah.
bold outputter. I was like, yeah, let's do it. Let's go have a conversation. I was conversant in quite a few languages, but I definitely was not native like, or
Right.
even that's probably a little bit painful for my the person putting up with me. Um, and I'll say that there's definitely like this sense of output anxiety in the immersion
Mm.
learning community. And I don't think that's healthy either. So I don't know. You guys both came into immersion learning as like the first time learning a language, right? So there's no before times for you.
No, there's before times, but like I was doing Japanese with Genki, and then I discovered immersion learning and was like, oh my gosh, I've been doing it wrong for 6 months. I can't go back to the beginning. And so I just scrapped it and started over Spanish. But
I
yes.
yeah, I wouldn't really say I had before times of learning a language because
Right. Right.
I don't really consider mandatory language class in high school to be like language learning because I didn't choose it. Like it wasn't of my own accord.
That's fair.
So like yeah, I basically came into Refold as a how do you say it? Like a moldable
Like a blank
uh
slate.
yeah,
Blank
moldable
slate.
mind.
Yes.
Yeah. And I
Hmm.
think, like, it's kinda the opposite for me, like, the whole output thing doesn't really bother me as much because I'm an introverted person anyways, and I'm perfectly happy to not output from day 1. And, yeah, there's that.
Yeah, I'm kind of in a similar boat to you, Gorg, where I my first goals when I started language learning was I was okay even if I sound like a caveman. I just wanted to be able to communicate to people around me. Um and then, after the joining the community, there's a lot of like peer pressure, where like, oh, you have to be perfect. I'm doing this. Why aren't you doing this too? Yada yada yada. My way is better. And there's a lot of like people comparing, um
I will
and
tell you, it's night and day. For anybody in the immersion learning communities out there,
yeah,
take a step back if you've never gone on a language exchange app or to a meetup. Normal people are not that judgmental. Oh, you got the pitch accent in this word wrong. They're just happy to talk to you. Uh,
right.
there are some exceptions where some people might be critical, but usually people are very friendly, very happy, and they want to make friends. They want, they they're not judging you like the way that other learners will judge you. I don't know what to say. It's a weird a weird sort of phenomenon. Even if it's not
Yeah.
competitive, learners are just
Yeah.
very harsh.
I'm also just anxious in general. I've had and been diagnosed with social anxiety before. Will say that output anxiety hasn't made things any better. um and I think it also has to do like with your goals, right? I think a lot of people feel pressured into having native like pronunciation as their goal, which is fine. If that's truly what you want, if that's what your goal is for your language learning journey or whatever, I think that's awesome and commendable. But it's also okay if you take a step back and you go, okay, what do I need this language for? How am I going to use it? How is it going to fit in my life? Is perfection necessary? Is it worth the time investment? because essentially at the end of the day, a language is a time investment. And, after stepping back, like I kind of drank the Kool-Aid. I was like, at first I was like, I don't really care how my output is. I just want to be understood. And then after a while, I thought, oh man, I really want to be perfect. If this is possible, I want to go hard and do it. But, after thinking about it in my life, being perfect at Spanish wouldn't help me at all. Um, and I'm not super interested in being perfect at Spanish. What I am interested in is being able to use it. So, after looking at that, I thought, it's not really that big of a deal. But it is still kind of weird talking to other people who have that goal, and that goal is something that they are really, really zealous about perfection. But I do think that that attitude has changed a lot in Refold, where people are a lot more open to the idea that maybe perfection isn't necessary for everyone. And immersion learning is still a good choice, even if perfection isn't your goal? But it is kind of a
I
weird.
think immersion learning is the best way to learn a language for sure. But
Absolutely.
I don't think
Mhm.
being obsessive about sounding native has to be a thing. But and I'm usually like the first one to say, hey, non-nativeness is the norm. And we know that intuitively because
Right.
we're English speakers. We're a minority. Okay.
Exactly.
Most English speakers are not native, right? Most English speakers are L2 speakers, and this is true for a few languages: Indonesian, Swahili, French. Not Spanish. Spanish is actually mostly natives, but there are a handful of languages where most speakers are L2. So we're used to, you know, different accents. But from the flip side, I have a friend who is Polish, and he's very good. He's C1 or C2 certified,
Right.
uh, almost native like, still sounds Polish. And there's worry about like discrimination, like, oh, they're gonna
Right.
think I'm Eastern European and I'm a plumber. And like there definitely is sometimes bigotry.
Right.
Depending like we are kind of a little bit privileged as like native English speakers who
Sure.
were all white. And it's like we're probably not gonna be judged too harshly. But definitely I think like if you're a South Asian moving to Japan, the Japanese people might be more critical of your accent, like so I do wanna give that sort of alternative
Absolutely.
perspective, like,
And that's why you have to evaluate, you
you have to
know,
evaluate.
you have
Not
to
every
evaluate
situation is
how are
the
you
same.
going to use the language? How important is it for you to do this? And do you care? And if you care, that's a good reason. If you care about your accent, even if it's not particularly useful to you, if you care, that's still a reason to pursue it. But I think you have to be honest with yourself and ask yourselves those questions and not just do what everybody else says that you have to do. That's but I agree with you, Gorg. I think that there are definitely instances where, having a native like accent is definitely beneficial.
I kind of wanted to call attention to. So we're talking about the mental health aspect of language learning, and I kind of wanted, like, we're kind of talking about the negative side of it, and I kind of wanted to call attention to some
Yes,
positives that I've seen from
absolutely.
it. Like, for
Yes.
example, in the past, I have had a lot of various interests that I've wanted to learn, a various number of skills, but I would inevitably drop it at some point and lose
This is
interest
why we're
because I wasn't
friends.
getting anywhere. Yeah.
This
But
is why we're
then
friends.
but then when I started immersion learning, it kind of showed me like, wow, if I actually do stick to something with a sound methodology, I will get results. And it's kind of carried over into other aspects of my life. I feel more confident in pursuing
Yes.
new things because I've already been shown that I can succeed in something.
Yeah. It's such a good feeling, isn't it?
Mhm.
Where I'm the same way. I've had so many hobbies in my life that I have, I tried roller derby. Okay, don't make fun of me. I tried roller derby
You
a long
tried
time
roller
ago.
derby?
I got
Oh my
super
god.
into it. I got super into roller
I
derby
believe that.
for
You look
like
like you would play roller derby.
thank you. I
Yeah.
didn't ever get to play, but I went to practices for months. I got really good at roller skating, and I was almost at the point where I was gonna audition for a team or audition what do you call it? try out. Sorry, I'm come from like a music artsy background. Anyway, I was gonna try out for a team, but then I moved out of state, and there wasn't a team local in my area. And then I had all this roller derby stuff. I still have it. It's like rotting in my closet. Or I
along with
tried to
the
get
hot dogs
into
too.
there's other hobbies that I try to get into. Yoga. Oh my gosh, I have yoga mats that I don't use anymore. I broke my wrist and then I just stopped doing yoga and I never got back into it. But language is something that it's the thing that I've been able to do for the longest amount of time. I've seen real progress. And even though I wouldn't consider myself like fluent or anything, I have more than exceeded my initial goals before I had discovered, immersion learning and whatever of I just want to be able to have a conversation. And I can do that and I can read books and I can do tons of stuff that and I'm still going. It's something that I've done every single day. And like Shiki said, it gives me the confidence to go, you know what, I can do other things too. So like this heart stuff that I have to make a lot of changes. I'm not sure what that's going to entail. We're still investigating. It's not serious, no one forget or anything. It's not a big deal. But um I if I wasn't learning languages, I think I would have been a lot more shocked and hesitant, but now I'm like, "Well, I've already done Spanish every day for a year, and that's not always comfortable. Okay, I can walk a couple miles a day, I can stop caffeine, and I can make these, like, lasting habit changes because of the confidence that, immersion technically, because that's what I'm doing, but, like, language learning in general has done for me. I feel like I'm, like, preaching.
If you are, I agree with you.
I
So,
know we're on the same page.
what's the
Pretty
opposite
funny.
of preaching to the choir, preaching to the congregation, like the people you're actually supposed to be preaching to? So,
Yes. I think I'm preaching
we
to the
we
choir.
we might be the choir here, but we've got listeners who, might not be in the choir, so no worries there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually a good point, Shiki, like positive mental health benefits from language learning. Um, I don't know. That's actually really, really good. I've never actually thought about it. I tend to be a negative person, who focuses on like, "Well, I'm not as good as my friends at Chinese," or "Well, I really wish Russian were Serbian," because I
Yeah.
feel like I just hate Russian with the hard signs and the soft signs, but I'm not gonna rant, get off topic. Um,
You're not gonna be negative about that when you're
not
trying to
gonna
be
be negative
positive.
about it,
Yeah.
positive. Um, what are some things that you guys feel good about with language learning? Like, one of my things is, at least over text, in local group chats, like, there's, like, a
Mm.
group chat for, like, my condo, right? Like, people do not know that I'm foreign when I chat, and I don't think it has anything to do with my level. I think it has to do with the fact that no one speaks it as an L2 as an L2 who is foreign, right? So, but it's really fun to me, like, sort of stealthing and, like, passing as a Filipino online, and there are a lot of people in the Refold community who have thought I was Filipino. Um, so that can be a really cool thing. It makes me happy. It's like, yeah, you're right. I did succeed at something, and that's cool.
That's awesome.
So yeah, are there any other positive mental health benefits from immersion learning, language learning?
I think just like in general, it's really good for your brain. Learning a language is one of a second language specifically, not just like one, but a second language is one of the best things that you can do for your brain. That's one of the reasons I decided to learn a language in the first place, because Alzheimer's and dementia runs in my family, and there have been studies that show that people who are bilingual and know at least one other language, the onset of Alzheimer's can be delayed up to like 6 years or something on average. So that is a big benefit. I think it also helps with focus. I think Shiki can relate. We're both pretty ADHD, and I think that learning a language and having to like really intently focus on something for a long period of time, that has helped me translate that into my work ethic. So in my day job, when I'm having to manage a bunch of things at once and really pay attention, I've found that it's actually easier now after having spent 2+ years learning Spanish.
Wow, it's really strange to think about how long our journeys are. You know, I've been at Spanish for like almost 4 times longer than you, Bree. Um,
Makes me feel good, actually.
yeah, I mean, and I can read books, particularly romance, and I handle the emails in it. But like that was
You can
my
do a
point
lot.
earlier. Yeah, that was my point. In Hulk, but Cole Hulk
Colk.
always compliments my Spanish, and like that's coming from a guy who did a master's in it. And that's one of my points about like taking it low and slow is fine. Like I've circled around back to Spanish. It's always there. I know if I want, I can pick up a book and read it. Um, and I can watch YouTube in it, and it's always there. If you can only squeeze in an hour a day, then it might take you 3 times longer, right? It took me like 3 times longer than you to get to where you are today,
Oh,
but
shucks. I'm
you can get there, right? Like, it
yeah.
doesn't have to be a race, We live a
It's not
long
a
time,
race.
right? We live
It's
80,
not.
90 years. The language is pretty much always gonna be with you,
Yeah.
you can't hit insane hours, it's fine.
Yeah. I think another thing too is like kind of like in that vein is don't compare your progress to other people. That's something that I've had a really hard time with is comparing my progress to other people, feeling bad because other people have made tremendous progress because they've just had, more time. They're younger, they've got more time, they're able to concentrate on it better, whatever. Um but recently I've just kind of stopped. I can't help it sometimes, I'm a human being, right? We do what we do. But I've made a real point to kind of like really think about the progress that I've made um positively, where it might not be as fast or as impressive as somebody else's progress. That doesn't change the fact that I have gone from essentially zero to reading, full-fledged novels with, well, the novel I'm reading right now is really difficult, but in
It's a
general,
native novel, right?
it's a native novel and they're
Yeah.
writing how they're saying words phonetically. It's kind of like when you read an English book and they
Have you ever
write
read
the
Mark
southern
Twain?
accent phonetically.
When I
I
used
think
to
in
work at an
school.
eikaiwa, I had a Japanese guy who was obsessed with reading Mark Twain, and
Really?
I'm like, I feel like people who are not from the Upper South or from the Lower Midwest, because like he had that sort of like Missouri twang to some of his characters. Would I feel like a lot of people would struggle with it?
Yeah, it's hard because you can't look up the stuff in a dictionary. So,
True.
like, if you don't know the word, I have to kind of like stop. It adds like an extra layer of difficulty where I have to look at the word and go, okay, what is this? Okay, I say it and I think, okay, I think this is what it's supposed to be. So I'm gonna look up
Don't people
this.
chat that way? I feel like all the time in Spanish and Filipino when people are chatting, they often type words phonetically
Yeah, I don't really chat with people though. I read novels. So
gotcha. You're a
yeah.
true input only person.
I'm a true I am a true reader. I'm on team reading, as we all know, but I'm not team chatting. Be my friend. No, I'm just kidding. I'm taking applications for people who want to talk to me and read my bad Spanish. Leave a comment
Mm.
below. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, on the subject of like comparing your progress to others, it's tough for me to see people who are like in high school or haven't started college or they're taking a break, they're not working, things like that. And they were in a position where I was like answering their newbie questions like 3 months
Mm,
ago in the Japanese server, and then all of a sudden they're like stage 2C, while I like just started stage 2C, and it's like, "What the heck? Slow down."
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's just you can't make those comparisons, right? If they are 13 or 14 and they have a lot of time and they do it right and they benefit from people who've been there and done that, they'll make good progress, which is good. It's commendable, but it's not healthy to compare yourself to, right?
It's not.
I
And it's
know
a
that, but I
very
can't help
easy
it.
trap. It's a
Yeah.
very
It's
easy trap to
incredibly
fall in.
easy, and I do it to myself, and I do it with people
Yes.
who are my friends. So,
Me
I
too.
I enjoy people in the community. I talk to them often, and I'm always like, "Oh yeah, I shouldn't be comparing myself here because this person has 5 hours a day to spend and I don't," and I fall victim to it too. It's I think normal, but it's definitely a trap, right? Because they're not. Let's lay out like what Shiki has on her plate. Basically full-time college, like short like one course for it not to be full-time. in the military, uh, and has a job. It's
Crazy.
tough, right? Like, you don't
And
have
you're learning a language.
and well, yeah, on top of
Yeah, on
all
top
Yeah.
that,
of
she's
all of it.
learning Japanese, so
You
it would
crushing
not
it.
be reasonable for her to, like, compare to people who can pull 5-hour days. It just wouldn't be reasonable. And that's one thing that I think sometimes younger people who haven't been there and haven't done that don't fully understand. People who've never even had a part-time job, right? Like, some days you're just really tired. You might be in meetings all day, and
Mhm.
then you have to cook and you have to pay bills, and even sometimes I do have the time, I don't wanna spend it using my brain. Um, One of my guilty pleasures, and I do feel guilt about it, and that's probably another thing that I shouldn't be feeling guilt about.
Don't feel guilt. I don't
Um,
know what it is, but don't feel guilt.
well, sometimes I read stories in English in bed instead of immersing when I could.
Oh gosh, yeah, I feel so guilty about my English binging. Yeah, that's like another podcast. I feel like I can talk about that forever.
I definitely have these negative thoughts. It's like, I am not immersing and I could be, you know?
Yeah.
Mhm.
You have to take care of yourself though, you know? Sometimes that's what you need.
It doesn't matter how okay I am at Spanish or Filipino, it still doesn't hit the same way English does. Like, I can read
It
everything with, like,
doesn't.
99.9999% word coverage, and even at, like, 98% word coverage, that's still quite a lot of lookups and, like, things where it's like,
Right.
Maybe I'll just have to tolerate the ambiguity." And there's just something pleasant about, like, opening up a page and understanding it 100% beyond a shadow of a doubt, and,
Yeah.
I feel guilty about it, and I probably shouldn't. That's just part of that sort of toxic, holdover from AJAC culture, I think.
Yeah.
Mhm. My
Yeah.
problem is English YouTube. Oh my god. It is
Me
so easy
too.
to just hop on my PlayStation 5, open up some YouTube,
Yeah.
just English YouTube, and just watch crap when I could just be, like, watching Japanese stuff. I have a Japanese YouTube. What am I doing?
This feels like a support group. Like, hi, my name's Bree, and I listen to too much English content. Like,
Yeah.
because
So,
sometimes you're just tired and you want to unwind, but I think that's okay. You have to give yourself permission to like. It's not all or nothing, right? Just because you do that doesn't mean that you're not spending good time immersion learning. And the amount of time you have to spend is the amount of time you have to spend, and whatever.
Mhm.
You gotta have healthy habits, and you gotta evaluate your goals, and you gotta work towards them. And sometimes that requires more time
my
learning,
English
sometimes it
YouTube
requires less.
is so polluted with target language content. I'm looking here, I've got a Polish song recommended, I've got Vietnamese stuff recommended, then I've got Refold, it's actually us right now being recommended. I've got
Hey,
Spanish stuff being recommended, Malaysian stuff being recommended, more Spanish stuff, some Arabic stuff,
right.
then a couple more English things, like 3 or 4. And if I scroll down a little bit, I'm getting into, like, my subs. I've got, uh, Filipino recipes and stuff being recommended. It's just so polluted. I don't have a proper English tube, but at the same time, there's just you can actually, if you ever have more than one target language, start to feel guilty about it.
Yeah.
I was talking to a community member earlier today. It's like, I want to like learn Chinese, but here I am reading a book in Indonesian because I can actually understand it. And that, if you ever get to the point, because I've been language learning for like, geez, almost 14 years. I've dabbled enough that I've actually gotten good at my dabbling languages, and you can start to feel guilty about your other L2. Like, I'm not supposed to be reading Indonesian. I'm supposed to be reading Chinese, right? Or like, I don't know. It's just toxic and not healthy.
Yeah.
And
I feel like
yeah,
I feel like it's some kind of, I don't know if it's actually a thing, but it feels like it would be some kind of, Greek tragedy where it's like we work at Refold and we do language stuff all day, but we can't like immerse ourselves, even though we guide other people on how to immerse. It's like super ironic.
for sure. Kind of a
I think,
paradox, I think.
Yeah.
yeah, it is. So I think if we were to like every episode, I'm like, what's the moral of this episode? But I feel like the moral of this episode is it's okay to have different goals, evaluate how language is going to fit into your life, do what you need to do to meet those goals, but not at the expense of your mental and physical and emotional health. Um, and ergonomics are super important. Like, don't get carpal tunnel, kids, and make sure that your earphones are set appropriately. If you're going to be immersing for long hours, be healthy about it, be safe, and get those gains. Is that what people say? I don't know anymore. But anyway, a couple of announcements are about to wrap up this podcast, but we are going to be having, for the people who are listening to the live recording, we are actually going to move to a voice channel. We'll link it in the podcast chat, and we'll have like a little after chat, after hours party, whatever you want to call it. We also want to announce that the Refold Japanese grammar guide, the grammar primer, Shiki, that's been released. That's ready to rock and roll, right?
Yeah, it's ready for public release after the patron beta test.
Yeah. And it's really exciting. The grammar guide has been made with like an immersion mindset in mind. So there's no fluff, there's no exercises, there's none of the stuff that you would get in a traditional grammar guide. Instead, what you're going to get is like straight to the point grammar explanations that will help you get the most out of your immersion more quickly. And we can link that maybe in the description of the podcast, if you're listening, and we'll link that. We'll probably announce that later in the Discord. So congratulations on being the first to know. But with that, thank you everybody for joining us for the live recording of the Refold Roundtable podcast. If you love this episode and want to hear more, you can listen to past episodes on YouTube and Spotify and anywhere else you listen to podcasts. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to give us a like and leave a comment to let us know. We want to hear your thoughts. We want to know what you think. We want to hear your suggestions. We want to know everything. So if you want to say anything, please leave a comment in the comments below. Voting is now open for next week's topic. Be sure to re-suggest topics that did not win the vote in previous weeks. We don't look at old suggestions. We want all fresh suggestions. So make sure you send in a topic again if it didn't win in a previous week. And with that, we'll see you later. Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of the Refold Podcast. We hope you enjoyed listening and maybe even learned something new. Projects, events, and content like this podcast are only possible thanks to our generous patrons. If you liked this and want to see more similar projects, please consider supporting us on Patreon. Visit community.refold.la/Patreon-benefits to learn more.